What's going on, fishing friends? We are live for our second portion of our fishing reports. So we've gone from North Carolina all the way down here to Southwest Florida, Cape Coral. Before we do that, shameless plug. So this shirt right here will allow you to catch more fish. The fish can tell you got it on. They can tell you got it on, and they will. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, it even makes me look good. I mean, that's something. They are available at www.thefishingchannel.net. The entire site is set up just for apparel. It'll be the easiest checkout you ever experienced. And my co-host is saying something to me. What's that?
It's also for women.
Oh, yeah. Man, it's also, we also have women's sizes. Lady C obviously makes it look incredible. But yeah, I mean, we tried a lot of shirts, and these are the only ones that were really flattering to women. A lot of the performance shirts are kind of, drop straight down, and don't give it that. I'm just gonna leave it right there. I'll leave it right there. Let's bring in our man E of Jupiter Kayak Fishing. What's going on, E? How are you, sir?
Good. How are you guys doing tonight?
We are doing great. We're not in Cape Coral, so we're not that great. But all things considered, we're living life. What about you?
I'm good. I've been fishing a lot lately.
Yeah.
So the weather is getting warm now, though. It's definitely in full heat right now. So getting out early.
What are we talking? 95 plus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%. That's daily. It looks like at about 10 o'clock, somebody turns up the heat usually. 10:30, it's when it starts.
So for your kayak fishing trips, what does that mean? Does that mean like a 5 a.m. start?
No, I'm still starting, 007, somewhere around there. And we just start pushing into the mangroves and some shaded areas. I mean, if we're gonna just get into the reports, because that's kind of what the tarpon are kind of doing. Once it gets warm, I just start pushing towards the marsh, which there is some shade anyway, so it's good for me as well. But the tarpon are thinking the same thing, the juveniles, and they're back in there, and I keep finding them, in little shaded areas back in the marsh once the heat gets up.
And when you say juveniles, you're talking how big?
Anywhere between 15 inches to like 25 inches is usually what you're finding back in the marsh back there. I got lucky a couple days ago and landed almost 40-incher. He was just a little short of it.
Was that the tarpon that we had as the thumbnail for the show?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So we got fresh picks, fresh fish, fresh picks. So that was just the other day back in the marsh and around Cape Coral.
Yes, yeah, but that one was out a little further out of the marsh because it was still early in the morning when we ran into him, which is kind of the thing, I've been running into them early in the mornings outside of the marsh. They don't push back yet, and then once the heat gets up, they start going back there, and that's where I find them after that. And then the reds kind of take over where the tarpon are in the mornings. They kind of push in to where the tarpon were usually.
Okay, so when you're fishing for, back in these marsh areas, and there's, that transition between reds and tarpon, is your technique the same? And you just kind of catch one or the other, or do you sort of have to be cognizant of that transition and switch your approach?
The biggest thing that changes is not necessarily the artificial, which I'm usually fishing with artificial if I'm by myself. But just like the previous report too, if they're not biting artificial, I'm gonna go and find bait as well because I want to catch fish.
And what's been your most effective bait for either redfish or tarpon or both?
Well, so the tarpon I've been using, this paddle tail's been the most successful one right here. It's a DOA paddle tail right here,
That
and
looks
I think
familiar.
I showed it last time, in the and this is it's been the same one, but the it's working very well with the tarpon.
Is that a
They
3 inch?
Yep, these are all 3 inchers. Yep, and then the retrieve is the only thing different. Is when I get around the tarpon, once I make that cast, once I let it sink to the depth I want it to, then it's a steady, slow retrieve, and then you set that hook as hard as you can when you feel anything. Uh, and for the reds, there's a little more finesse. You sometimes they'll want it drop. Like I say, pop, pop, drop, where it's sitting more on the ground, and or they want it, swimming like a mullet. But the tarpon, they seem to like that steady retrieval. Like I've tried to do little finesse with them, they don't fall for it. They just, if they see something moving, they'll attack if it's moving constantly.
So let's talk about that because I think tarpon are unique in that respect, and people that don't fish for them often might not understand. You say you're setting the hook as hard as you can. Uh,
Absolutely.
we don't talk too much about like after you hook the fish, then what? But tarpon are kind of different in that respect. Let's talk about that for a second. Why set the hook so hard, and then what happens specifically from a kayak? Because I've always found that dynamic of catching tarpon from a kayak to be really fascinating.
It is. It can get real messy and fun at the same time, is what I say. Um, but what was the first question? I'm
So
sorry.
the first question is, tarpon are a little bit different, and we don't talk about, you
Oh,
know,
after you hook them.
after you hook them, and then why you set the hook so hard, and then from that point on.
So their mouths, I say their mouths are like trying to set a hook in a bucket. You know, one of those buckets that you use all the time on your boat. Try to see what it would look like to set a hook in one of those, because that's how their mouths are, and that's why I say you got to set that hook really hard, because you really want to make sure that hook is set. And then even after that, I'll give it. After his like first jump, I'll give it one more set just to make sure it's really tight, and then that's it. Then I don't play with it anymore, and that usually works. But then again, every jump you have to point the rod at him. That's another thing that helps you land those tarpon. That's usually the difference between landing them and just watching them jump. It's pointing, but again, they spit hooks. That's what they're good at.
Yeah, so it just sort of comes with the territory, right? If you're fishing for tarpon, you should expect them to throw a hook. You said something that I thought was pretty important. So you point at the tarpon when it makes its jump. You point, and then obviously you want to make sure all that slack's out of the line.
Correct. So that's what you're doing is when he jumps, you're pointing at it, so that slack it gives him, and then as soon as he lands again, you're back to fighting the fish just like normal. Everything you normally do is you're back to normal. It's just those jumps that you really got to do, and you can use that same rule with snook. Snook like jumping a lot down here too.
They sure do.
So yeah, they're just as good as tarpon, at spitting hooks, to be honest with you. But they're both there right now. Yeah.
So uh, with that tarpon you caught the other day, you said it was pushing 30,
Almost 40. He was just,
almost
he
40.
was
So,
almost 40.
so a tarpon that size can take you for a sleigh ride on a kayak, correct?
It took me about 12 minutes to land him.
Yeah, I mean,
And yeah,
so
you got to make sure you don't make a lot of the things that every single tarpon that I've caught on the kayak has ran under the kayak aggressively, to the point where I have to stick the rod in the water, to make sure he doesn't break it.
yeah, I was about to say, have you ever thought that a tarpon was about to break your rod?
Yes, yeah, that one. In the video, I posted the video, and you could see it at one point. I had to stick the rod. I'm almost halfway into the water because he tucked in so fast and unexpectedly under the kayak. So, but I mean, I think that's an advantage too, because in a boat he'd probably break off or break the rod. In the
Right.
kayak just kind of spins and goes with the momentum of the fish, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, you know, live these scenarios out in their head 100 times before it actually happens.
Right.
Um, but you know, one thing, I've never caught a tarpon off of a kayak. I've never caught a tarpon. Period. It's on my bucket list. But you know, if that tarpon's making a run, you know, perpendicular to your boat, so like off to your right, and you're in a kayak, you know, what's your move as a charter captain, or if this is happening for one of your customers, what are you telling them? What are you telling them to do?
I'm trying to get them away. First of all, if there's mangroves around, I'm just literally trying to get them away from that. And if they're anchored, because I do a lot of times when I have my clients, we'll anchor down and we'll sit on a spot and work that area. If that anchor's down, you know, I try to make sure that they can either bring it up or I'll run over there and bring that anchor up myself, because that tarpon, he'll go at some point towards that anchor line, guaranteed. It's guaranteed he's going to go towards it, and usually you can lose one that way. So that's one of the biggest things that you have to worry about. But if you're not anchored, that's one less thing that you have to worry about there. But it's just
Yeah.
keeping them away from the mangroves. But the tarpon aren't really like the snooks and the reds that they charge towards the mangrove line. Not these juveniles. I haven't really seen them aggressively going back towards the mangrove line. They depend on their jumps to try to get away, is really what they're trying to do, you know.
And the jumps are, I mean, are ridiculous, aren't they? I mean, are they able to make the same kind of jumps in shallow water like that? Are they still jumping 4 and 5 feet
They're
out of the
still
water?
jumping, yeah. I mean, they're jumping, you know, 4 feet. I would say these juveniles sometimes can get up to there. I mean, they're above me when I'm sitting in the kayak. It's pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Let's talk about other species. I mean, like I think I want to talk about tarpon all day because it's like the fish that I want to catch. But you mentioned redfish. I mean, snook are still happening down there, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean everything. Like I said, down here, every time the reds are finally starting to be less finicky, is what I call them. So they're being a little more aggressive. And what's working out the best for me lately is this guy right here, a good old school weedless golden spoon right here. So that's a weedless one. This is what makes it weedless.
Lady
And
C's
that's
got one of those.
who does.
Lady C, my co-host.
Okay.
Go.
Yeah, they're working great for reds right now. And then once I'm around reds, I'll switch to this paddle tail a lot of the times, because it kind of has that shrimp look to it. I think
Yeah,
again I
what
showed
color
you.
is that? Do you know?
It's called. I think it's this one's called Diablo. I think what company makes it? Wise Guys Tackle, I believe.
Okay.
I believe it's called the Diablo Wise Guys Tackle.
And
That's the one.
you usually use the same size jig head that you had on the other one. What size jig head are you using?
So it's either quarter 1/8 or quarter ounce is usually what I'm using, because I'm never in more in deeper water than about 5 feet. You know, I'm usually and if there's a hole, I do have some you know, heavier jig heads, but 3/4 maybe is the heaviest that I use in the waters that I'm usually around.
Oh
But you
wow,
know, this is
that's a
it.
pretty heavy jig. Yeah.
Yeah, this is it right here. And then of course, when I'm going live bait, you know, pop and cork is the technique of that I use the most. And whenever we go out with clients, this is the number one technique that we're using, and that's working also with tarpon and reds, using either shrimp, you know, cut up ladyfish has been doing well, because that's what's around. That's a lot of the bait that's around is a lot of ladyfish. So I keep a few of them. If we get into some ladyfish, we cut them up, and it usually turns into either a tarpon or a red later on in the afternoon.
Nice, nice. Um, any other fish? Any notable catches that you've had this month?
I mean, we like I said, every day last week that I went out, which was about I think 4 times I went out last week, and then I mean between the last 2 weeks I've been out, I'd say 8 times, and I've hooked the tarpon almost every time. Haven't
Wow.
landed one every time, But that's kind of what I've been chasing. Just like you want to talk about tarpon all day. Every morning, my first goal is to go and find them rolling somewhere, and just start chasing them and see if they want to bite until they disappear, and then I go and chase reds or trout. But
Sure.
I stay on the tarpon until I can't find them anymore lately. Because
So
once they
yeah, you don't have to twist my arm to talk about tarpon. So when you're out there targeting tarpon, you obviously have developed your spots that you go and look for. But similar to how I was talking with Tim in the last episode, um, as you are learning those spots, and we don't want you to share them, obviously, but what types of things were you looking for? I know you mentioned marshy areas, but what were kind of the key elements that seemed to be consistent between the spots that you found tarpon?
Uh, the key for me has been finding calm water, especially in the morning. If it's a windy day, just so I can see them, so I can find them, because I don't want to, go around and making a lot of casts. That can get tiring. Some days it's that, but when with the tarpon, if you find a few of them rolling, or even if you find a single one rolling, if you see one roll, you can work that area for 5 to 10 minutes and then move on. So you can cover a lot of area and find some fish eventually. That's kind of what I've been doing in the mornings until it gets too hot. And but that one, the big one that I hooked, it was towards the end of like the morning. I think that guy was hooked at like 10:30. I could check. So it was already getting a little warm, but he was still out there. So it's just calm water so I can find them rolling. That's been the key for me. And they have been consistently in the same spots, but I usually launch from different areas. I during the week I try not to go to the same areas all the time, just to keep myself better. I think that's how you keep yourself better. You start
Sure.
going to those same spots,
Hmm.
you lose your skills, I think, a little bit. But I've been running into them everywhere I've been going. So, in the same conditions, no wind, in the mornings, find them rolling. And then once it gets warmer, find some shaded areas back in the mangroves. And they won't be rolling, but they're usually sitting in some choke point or under a mangrove tree in some shade once
So
the afternoon sun comes out.
somebody who makes a foolish move and doesn't book a trip with you, uh, uh, when they're looking for a tarpon rolling, what does that look like?
I mean, it's literally just like a little splash above. I know last time you guys were down here, we saw a lot of mullet, and sometimes it looks like that, but just think of like one mullet doing it in the same spot, or maybe four or five, not the big school of mullet. Um, so it's yeah. I mean, it just little rolls, little movement, and like I said, it's usually in calm water, and it just looks abnormal. Um, and a few times they're eating just like snook. You'll hear them back there smacking, bait under the mangroves when they're getting aggressive, and I love to hear that, because when they're doing that, then you're definitely gonna get them to eat. Uh, and I
Because
forgot to
they're
mention,
actively feeding.
I put this stuff on almost every one of my paddle tails with
Ladyfish.
these guys. Yeah, it doesn't matter which one. I use mullet. I use bluefish. Um,
What about that other one? That one, the
what juice? They have
hey,
that.
you said it, not me.
I've
Guys, it
never
actually
used it.
exists. There is a pro cure. We're not just being foul. There's a
Yep.
pro cure named butt juice that
Yep.
he showed us or told us about while we were
Instead
down
of
there.
ladyfish, it says butt juice. That's
Sure
100%
does,
true.
and they all work.
They do. They do. They all work. I've never had an issue. I mentally use ladyfish when I'm out more in the open water. Once I get to the marsh, if I do have mullet, I tend to use more mullet because there's no ladyfish back in the marsh. So I tend to do that, but it doesn't really matter. That's just me in my head.
Right. So let's close it out with one last question. If someone is going to book a trip with Cape Coral's Jupiter kayak fishing, obviously we're looking into August now, later in August and even September. What sorts of changes can people expect?
Well, hopefully the weather gets cooler. That's the biggest thing. Most people just it gets too hot for people
Yeah.
once it gets to like 11 o'clock. Everybody's like they're ready to go home, and sometimes that's when the bites starting for the reds.
Wow.
But
They really
yeah,
don't mind the heat, do they?
no, no, and we have again our kayaks are all Hobie kayaks. I bring umbrellas up with us so we can if it gets too hot, we'll sit out under a mangrove, bring the umbrella up, set some bait out. You can use the umbrella while you're fishing. You know, I try to make it as comfortable as possible because when I'm out there by myself, I have my umbrella out too when it gets too hot because I don't stop just because it gets hot. I keep going. So I find alternative ways for me to stay out in the water longer. And an umbrella helps me out a lot.
It probably keeps you skinny, doing all that sweating. Well, guys, Captain
I
Eloy is a
offset it
five-star.
every.
What's that?
I offset it.
Yeah, there you go. Captain Eloy is a 5-star rated kayak guide in Southwest Florida. Book your trip today. You're sure to have a great adventure, learn how to fish, kayak, and get on some great fish. I can stand behind that. When we fished with you, it certainly was a fantastic adventure. I was just blown away by the fact that like in your head is like a human fish finder because you already know the depths of all the areas. Like you're like, what are we in now? And you tell me before I told you, you're like 4 feet, and I was like 3.9. But you have a vast knowledge of a very large area, which is super impressive when you talk about fishing from a kayak. So,
I'm still learning more areas. I every week I say, hey, I'm gonna go somewhere I've never been before. So I find new area. Some of those days are busts, and I find nothing. But that's the only way to find out if there's new areas and find different fish. So
and I'll tell you, E, every really good charter captain or kayak fishing guy that I've ever met does that exact same thing. They put in the time when it's hot, when it's raining, when it's cold, when they're not feeling like doing it. They put in the time, and if you get to that point, it's kind of like people just take their hats off to you because once you put in the work, you can watch a fishing report like this all you want, and not quite have the knowledge that someone that's put in the time and the work. So, guys, don't hesitate if you're going to be in this area. You don't have to be in Cape Coral. We were in Matlacha. There's Pine Island right there. All of those areas are within like a 15-20 minute drive of Cape Coral. He's mobile. He can come to you. He knows your area just as well as he knows Cape Coral. So don't hesitate to book a trip. Eloy, it's been a pleasure, man, as always. And we look forward to having the same show, talking about some awesome fishing next month.
You need to come down here next year for this tarpon.
I think we are. We're actually planning a trip down to Georgia in about a month, but I don't think we're going to make it all the way down there. But everything I hear is I keep coming too early for tarpon, and that I need to come when it's miserably hot and only you can take it.
June is kind of when it started for me. June is when I started really running into them. I started seeing them at the end of May, but June, it was almost every time I've been out, I ran into a tarpon.
And how bad is it in June? Is it already in the 90s?
You'll get used to it. I'll take that as a yes.
I grew up in Atlanta, man, and like I used to be so much more heat tolerant, and I've just kind of gotten more and more wussy as the years have gone on. But if it means a tarpon, I'm down. Let's do it.
I mean, you can start as early as 06. The sun's already up at 06, and 06 to 11, you can catch tarpon in that time. You can catch it.
Well, let's do it. Everyone at home, thanks so much for watching. E, you're the man, and we will see you next month.
I love those shirts.
Get one. I can do a trade of one of these for some of your apparel. There it is, right there. Where can people get that apparel?
Well, we're not making any of these shirts, but on our Facebook, we have our Gators.
Got it. Oh, those Gators are sweet. Go pick out one of those. It's not your run-of-the-mill Gator. Those things are awesome. So I encourage everyone to go check that out. Take care, guys.